David, thanks so much for coming on to Belfast Real today. You're the head instructor of World Jiu-Jitsu Federation Ireland, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And you've also started a new company called Breath Sensei, or
Yeah.
is that
Well,
right?
yeah, well, sort of with the World Jiu-Jitsu Ireland, I'm the head coach. I am the sort of the head of the organisation. We have about 3.5, or we did before lockdown, we had 3.5 to 4,000 students training in about 90 clubs around the north of Ireland and Donegal, with 1 or 2 clubs in the south, far down the south. So yeah, that's the sort of my main role. The Breath Sensei sort of, that title wasn't something that I decided to have. I trained with Steve Maxwell, who is a phenomenal guy. He's in his late 60s. He spent something like 15 years or more traveling the world with just a backpack teaching. And he taught mobility, strength, martial arts, and breathwork. And I brought him to Ireland to do a breathwork course because although I'd been teaching in martial arts for quite some time, as a child, I had asthma. And as a child, I had a lot of health issues. And even sort of in the peak of my training in my 20s, I constantly had chest infections. Every winter, I got a chest infection. I was prescribed inhalers to deal with these chest infections. And it was just something that, it's like having an injury. You just deal with it. You just stick at it and work through it. But my sleep wasn't great. And I listened to Steve on London Real, some of the stuff that he was talking about sleep and the impact that learning how to breathe correctly could have on it. And I brought him over. It wasn't cheap. It was $3,000 to bring him over for a weekend for a course. But I wanted to see the guy, and I think that we all need to invest in our own growth. It's great to say you want to be better at something, but unless you're willing to put your money where your mouth is and actually put the time in and train with the best around the world. So I brought him over, and I didn't pay for it fully because I brought other people on the course. And he did some very simple tests on how people were breathing at that point in time, and I realized that my breathing just wasn't as good as it should have been. My sleep, I was sleeping for about 8 hours a night, and waking up just feeling shattered. And you wonder, how do you go to bed not feeling that tired? And 8 hours later, you've slept for 8 hours, and you wake up and you just feel like crap, And it would take me about an hour to get sort of woke up, and I just didn't understand it, and I struggled with it intellectually. I struggled with why did that happen. So I went on a course with Steve, and he said, look, within 3 to 4 days, you're going to be sleeping, and you're probably going to be sleeping less but more refreshed. And one of the things that he says is tape your mouth closed. Tape your mouth closed at night.
Yeah.
And at that time, now maybe it's because I'm around a lot of people who are doing breath work. Now it seems that everybody's taping their mouth. But at that time, it was a strange thing to say, tape your mouth. And when I came home from the course, and I said to my wife, I'm going to tape my mouth tonight, closed. And she said, nah, listen, don't you be taping your mouth. And I said, well, why not? She says, you might die. And I said, I'm not going to die. I'm going to breathe through my nose. But she was really concerned about me dying.
Yeah.
So, she brought out the big guns. She said, if you love me, you won't tape your mouth.
Right.
Said, what can I do,
Yeah.
So I actually waited till she fell asleep and then I taped my mouth. So the first night I woke up, I was obviously used to breathing through my mouth. So I woke up at 3 o'clock in a panic and ripped the tape off my mouth. And Steve was still in the country, and I had a chat with him. He said, look, just stick at it. And I stuck at it. By the Thursday, I was waking up about an hour and a half. I woke up, I usually got up at about 8 o'clock. I woke up at 6:30, and I thought, oh, I've still got an hour and a half to sleep. But I wasn't tired. It was fresh. And I was talking to Steve, and he said, hey, it's a breathing, man. It's a breathing. It's a tape. And it was. And for the past 5 odd years, I have taped my mouth religiously every single night. And I brought my sleeping pattern down from 8 hours a night down to 6 hours a night. If I go to bed at 11:30, I wake at 5:30. If I go to bed at 12, I wake up at 6. There's no alarm needed. There's nothing. I get up, I have a cup of coffee, I go for a run. So it's just giving me more time. I'm not saying it's going to happen that way for everybody.
Yeah.
And that was just one of the things with the breathing. But and what happened was that then I seen how dysfunctional my students were. When I was taking a jiu-jitsu class, there was people going, and there's, the odd time, I don't run that kind of class, but the odd time people were throwing up. But it was always the people who were going before they threw up, And so I started incorporating it into my classes. And then people asked me to take specific courses in breath work. So I went and took the courses. And in martial arts, we all have titles like Sensei or Shihan or Guru or something. So my title has always been Sensei. I have a lot of different titles as I progressed through the organization. I got a lot of different ones, but the first one I ever got was Sensei, and I'm happy enough, to use that one. It just means teacher. So then people start calling me the Breath Sensei. So then my wife said, you should actually put that on your page.
Yeah.
That should be your title. You should be the Breath Sensei. So that's where we've went with it, and it's worked really well. I was, before lockdown, I was meant to go to London to teach in London. Obviously lockdown happened, I couldn't teach, and I've been teaching all over Ireland. While lockdown was happening, I was taking free Zoom classes, and I think it took about 4 or 5. So we didn't have 100 in each of them, because when it's free, people sign up for it, but they don't necessarily do it because there's no value in it. If they had paid £100, they would have turned up, but because it was free. So we got about 80 in most of the courses, and got really good feedback from it. People with anxiety, they were dropping their anxiety. People with asthma, again, asthma levels were dropping. Didn't have as much, didn't have to use as much inhalers, so all went well. So that's how the Breath Sensei started. And it's taken on a life of its own, to be fair. Yeah. I now work with clients one-to-one, do sort of Zoom conferences and that sort of thing.
See, with the breathing, I know we go back maybe 10 years ago, I remember there was a device called Power Breathe that came on the market, and it kind of got people thinking about how they breathe, they breathe. Yeah. I know breathing is obviously natural. For anyone who maybe is looking at this for the first time, maybe a personal trainer or a martial arts instructor, or even a doctor, what is the issue with our breathing? Or I know there's I know the Joe Rogan podcast was up there a few days ago, and there's one chronic mouth breathing and the effect on the body. Can you go in a bit more detail about it?
Yeah, well, James Nestor, great guy. I have his book. I've followed a lot of the work that he's done over the last 10 years, and basically, we're not designed to breathe through our mouth. That's the simple fact. We're just not. If you look at all the mammals around the world, they don't breathe through their mouth. They breathe through their nose, with the exception of a dog will breathe through its mouth. It'll pant. And a cat will breathe through its mouth when it's sick. But all other animals breathe through their nose. So if you look at a horse, a horse is running as fast as it can, and it's nasally breathing. You look at a cheetah, any sort of prey animals, they're all nasally breathing, and any sort of animals that hunt, they're breathing through their nose, and they're moving at quite a high pace. The problem that has happened over time, because our ancestors didn't breathe through their mouth, they were nasal breathers, and you can see that if you go back in history, you can actually see the jaw lines. They've got a better jawline, and their nasal capacity is greater. But the problem with breathing through your mouth is that mouth breathing is linked with upper chest breathing. Upper chest breathing is a fight or flight breath. So, if you're breathing into your upper chest, then basically you open up the receptors for fight or flight. And what that does, it causes a stress response. So anybody who has high anxiety, anybody who has high levels of stress, people who are asthmatic, people who have difficulty sleeping, you'll find that they're upper chest breathers. If you think about it, I like to simplify as much as I can what is a very complex thing, because I'm dyslexic, but I try to read all these studies that are done in different universities around the world, because people think, well, it's just breathing. I've been doing it since, and sometimes I'll put a post up and some idiot will say, I've been doing it since I was born, I know how to breathe. Fine, no problem. And that's great if that's the way you want to think. But here's the simplicity of it. If you think about somebody taking a panic attack, how are they breathing when they take a panic attack?
Nice short breaths.
It's very short. It's in through the mouth and it's upper chest. Think about somebody who's relaxed. They're breathing into their nose, and it's slow and it's rhythmic. And if I just had my son had a son yesterday, and I have an 8-week-old grandson as well. And if you watch their breathing, you just see their bellies going up and down. Their bellies are going up. The babies don't breathe into their chest. So upper chest breathing is linked with anxiety and stress and the release of stress hormones. And the problem with that is that then it means that and especially for people who are martial artists, they get stuck in that mode where they're constantly waiting for the next fight almost. So there's that level of anxiety. So we have to be able to switch off. And so in this stage, there's so much to it that it's hard to actually drill it down to one thing. But if you're struggling with your weight, your breathing could be one of the issues. So if we just go into that just as a sort of a general thing. If you're breathing into your upper chest, well, when you're anxious or when you're stressed, what do you crave? You crave sugar. It's a very quick fuel. And centuries ago, you couldn't find that fuel. It was maybe you get some fruit, or you maybe get some honey would be the best source. But now you just go to the shop and it's there. And if you go to a petrol station after a hard day's work and you're going to pay for your petrol, what's sitting right in front of you? Bars of chocolate. And what do? Because you're stressed, you lift the bar of chocolate and you eat it on the way home and you get a sugar spike, and so breathing in your upper chest encourages you to put on weight. First of all, it encourages you to eat the wrong thing. Because most people, everybody knows how to lose weight. There's not a person in this country doesn't know, listen, you just eat a wee bit less and exercise a wee bit more and that'll make all the difference. But they don't do it because I know that there's times that I eat, not because I need nutrition, but because I want some chocolate, because I'm a bit stressed. So, and that's decreased as I've learned how to breathe right. So this is called fight or flight. If you're breathing into your diaphragm, it's called rest and digest. So as the name suggests, you're digesting your food. Anybody who has irritable bowel syndrome or issues with toileting, it could be because of the breathing. Because if you think of, if you have a serious stressful interview or something like that, you need to go to the toilet because your body wants to offload. Your body's thinking, I'm going to go in for a fight, so I want to offload anything that's in my system. So what happens is when you're in stress mode, you're eating, but you're not getting the nutrition out of the food. It's just passing through you. So for you to actually really digest your food, you have to be in rest and digest. And if you're an athlete and you want to build muscle, well, you don't build muscle in the gym. You break down muscle in the gym and you build muscle when you're resting. So if you don't rest appropriately, then you're not going to build that muscle. So for building muscle, for not carrying too much weight, that is a major factor. So how you breathe is a major factor. Just going into very simple other things. When you eat your food, and this is again about nutrition, because everybody thinks about, I need to eat this, this, and this, but they don't think about how they eat it. Nobody, you know, if I could say to you, what should you eat, and you'll be saying you should eat proteins, you should eat carbs, and you should have the basic fats and all that sort of stuff. But I say, well, how should you eat it? Well, I should eat it in this portion or that. But no. How should you physically eat it? Most people would say, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But how you eat it is going to determine everything. Because the first thing is, when you're stressed, what's the first thing that happens when you're stressed? You lose saliva from your mouth. So if you have no saliva in your mouth and you're eating your food, well, digestion starts in the mouth with the saliva. And there's no saliva there, then the digestion system is being overloaded by the time you get to your stomach. So you should be eating in a relaxed way. And that's why when people rush their food, they get indigestion. You know, it's common sense, but it's not that common. So slowing down when you eat, chewing your food better, then what happens is the saliva in your mouth interacts with food, starts to break it down, and then by the time it hits your stomach, it's already digested. You know, it's almost like when you get something in your mouth, you chew it enough, so it's almost like a baby food, and then by the time it gets to your stomach, it's easy to digest. But anybody who stuffs food into them, hard to digest, stomach issues, and if you're not taking the nutrition out of your food, then you're going to have issues at some point down your life. So I started. When I start on this, there's no stopping me.
Yeah.
But you know, that's just a simple fact that just food, just how you eat. The other thing is bad breath. You know, the flora in your mouth changes if you are breathing through your mouth. So because it changes, you have bad breath. And one of the things they say about determining whether you're going to take a heart attack is whether you have bad teeth or bad gums.
Okay.
And again, because the flora in your mouth is changing because you're breathing through your mouth. You know, so there's so many aspects of this that people just think, well, it's just, I know how to breathe, I've been doing it since I was a child. Yeah, but you might be stressed out, you might be overweight, you might have high blood pressure. These things are caused. I'll tell you a very quick story. I had a client came to me, and I can tell the story because he's actually told it himself on Facebook.
Okay.
A personal trainer, and he was taking panic attacks, and he doesn't know how they started. He just knew that he was taking panic attacks, and he would have a client every lasted 45 minutes, and he'd have a 15-minute break, and then have another client. But in that 15 minutes, he was panicking before the next client came on. And so one of his friends put him in touch with me, and we did it over Zoom. We give him some breathing exercises for the panic, to relieve the panic. It was actually to take him from sympathetic nervous system into parasympathetic nervous, from fight or flight into rest and digest. And we made him, I said, look, you're going to have to do this every hour for 2.5 minutes. And I said, I know it's a bit hassle. And I said, listen, let me stop you there. 2.5 minutes and not having an anxiety attack, the investment is priceless. So he sent me a message the following morning, and he just wrote on it, game changer. And I spoke to him at the next session, and he said, I haven't had a panic attack since I started doing those breathing exercises.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now this was the thing. He did say, but my blood pressure is really low. It went really low because he was checking himself. And I said, well, I'd got him to fill in the form before he worked with me. And he was meant to tell me everything, but he didn't tell me he had high blood pressure and that he was on beta blockers.
Okay.
So if you have high blood pressure, beta blockers are meant to bring your blood pressure back to normal.
Yeah.
So what had happened was, when I spoke to him, I said, look, go back to your doctor and check to see if you need these beta blockers. The following week, he came back to me and said, blood pressure's fine. What had happened was that his blood pressure was high. He was taking beta blockers to bring it down to level. But what was happening is, because he was doing his breathing exercises, they were actually dropping it below level. So when he went off the beta blockers, he went back to normal. So his blood pressure returned to normal within, well, it was 2 weeks, but it would have been 1 week if he hadn't been taking the beta blockers. And he's now, we chat every now and again. And I messaged him in the lockdown and said, lockdown can make people anxious. And I said, how you feeling with the lockdown? He says, a couple of wee wobbles, but I did the exercise, no problem. So he was a quick fix because he hadn't had the anxiety for too long. If you have it a lot longer, then it's going to take a bit longer. It's like if you're 5 kilos overweight, you're going to lose that fairly rapidly. If you're 40 kilos overweight, it's going to take a bit more time. So for him, it was a quick fix. For other ones, it's just a wee bit longer. But the breath work I've been working with running clubs, training runners how to run better, simply through using nasal breathing. And
is this just while they're running? Sorry, is this the nasal breathing as they're running?
Yeah. They're nasally breathing when they're running. And I can never remember the guy's name, but the guy who did the 2-hour marathon.
Yes, I forget. It was in Berlin, I think, a few months back.
Yeah. A few months back, but I have a breakdown on my private page. Was done by a guy who's a chi runner. We talk about chi as in the chi energy and tai chi, but this guy teaches chi running, which is a relaxed form of running. And he broke the whole how his stride pattern was, his foot fall on the ground, but also his breathing. And throughout the 2 hours, he was nasally breathing. And again, if we talk about panic and what a panic attack looks like, that's a panic attack. Now, when I'm out running, I run past people who are going, where's the relaxation? Where's the fluency? How can you get into, that flow state?
Yeah.
There's going to be no flow state there. When I'm breathing, and I was out running this morning, it's nasally breathing the whole time. And that's it. And I run, and if I need to mouth breathe, then I'm running beyond capacity for me. But I take a back a wee step. Now, if you're a runner and you've always been breathing through your mouth, you're going to have to, it's a case of retraining. And it's like anything else. If you're learning how to type, I type with a couple of fingers. My wife types like this. For me to learn how to type like she does, I'd have to slow way down before I could get faster. The same thing with a runner. They're going to have to nasally breathe, slow down a wee bit, and then their speed levels increase.
The difference between mouth breathing and nasal breathing, I think when I was just researching just to do the interview with yourself, our nasal cavity is a lot bigger than what we think it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It gets more oxygen in the bloodstream, isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a nose. So 30% of your nose is at the front here, and then the rest of it, 70% is here. So it's a massive size. It's almost the size of your fist. It's not quite, but it's almost in the back of your, and the human body's a smart, body's a phenomenal piece of kit. It wouldn't use up so much space in your skull unless there was a reason. And, there's something like 30 different reasons why you should breathe through your nose. And, the simple ones, it heats the air before it gets into your lungs. So you're not getting people with exercise-induced asthma, if they're going out for a run on a cold day and they go, they're taking all this cold air into their lungs, whereas if you breathe into your nose, it's heating the air before it comes in. Second thing is that it has a filtration system, and the filtration system's clearing out all impurities. And I haven't posted that much about COVID-19 over the lockdown. There's a lot of, I've been on webinars with doctors that are working in New York in the COVID wards. I've been talking to, I've been on webinars with people in Russia who are in the COVID wards and people who are helping with that. But it's white noise. There's too much noise out there. And I don't want to add to that noise. But basically, if you're breathing nasally, you do reduce the chances of getting any kind of virus. The filtration system's there, and it's heating the air before it goes in your lungs. It's common sense. you know. So breathe through your nose, 100%. I'll give you a couple of other things, and this might sound bizarre, but I'll tell you it anyway.
Yeah.
When you breathe through your mouth, you don't create any nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is created in the nasal cavity. Nitric oxide is the key component to the little blue pills that men of a certain age take. Okay, and the reason it's the main component of that is it creates blood flow. So if you're taking Viagra, it's to create blood flow, because men of a certain age, their blood flow isn't as good. So the point is that if you produce nitric oxide in your nasal passage, then it creates better blood flow. And that means better blood flow to all the organs. So if someone has to take a blue pill to increase blood flow, then it dictates that they have poor blood flow. Obviously, if they have poor blood flow, they have poor blood flow not only to that organ, but to every organ, which means they have poor blood flow to their heart. They have poor blood flow to their kidneys and to their liver. Long-term effects of that are not good. And you can actually increase your blood flow simply by learning how to breathe correctly. You don't have to take a tablet and we have a pharmacy built inside us that no tablet can match. But yet and withal, when you take a tablet, you don't know the side effects. You know, if you read any of the labels, may cause this, may cause this, may cause this. Breathing, what's it going to cause? You know, what are the side effects of breathing? It's just nonsense. Certainly if you do breath holds, there can be, you can go too far, especially if you do it in water, which is a no-no. But, the side effects for me of breathing correctly, I haven't had a cold or flu or any kind of illness whatsoever since I started learning how to breathe correctly. I'm sleeping 6 hours a night instead of 8. And I'm not saying that'll work for everybody, but I'm down to 6 hours a night instead of 8. I'm less irritable and I'm less anxious. And the reason for I'm less irritable and I'm less anxious is because I'm not living in fight or flight.
Yeah.
Your
stress levels down.
My stress levels are way down. And when you're releasing cortisol and all the different stress hormones, they're attacking the heart and the liver and the lungs. All the soft tissue are getting damaged with that. And that's the effects of long-term stress. And also you're not building a strong immune system. Your basic defense against any form of viral attack is your immune system. Yeah. And the unfortunate fact is that most of the people who passed away with the COVID-19 virus were elderly who had a poor immune system or had an underlying health issue, so had a poor immune system. Also, you had, I think it was about 150 staff in hospitals who succumbed to the virus. When you're stressed, your immune system is shot. These people were under immense stress. They're working long hours with PPE on, which was restricting their breathing as well. So there's so many different factors there. But they were in the front line and they were massively stressed, and that did have a dramatic effect on their ability to fight diseases.
Yeah. Do you think we've very much in our society today, and I'm not, for anyone watching this, I'm not knocking the Western healthcare system, because it's fantastic and it saves a lot of lives. But do you not think today everyone's kind of like just looking for a quick fix, grab a pill, go to a doctor? The doctor, maybe, because I know in my own work we have a scheme called GP referral, where maybe some of the symptoms that you just said, they'll go to their doctor, the doctor's giving them anti-anxiety medicine, and the doctor maybe go, look, we have a referral scheme through either like yourself doing the breath work, or go to a gym. I want to go, like, no, just give me a pill. Do you think we'll ever reach a point where we can balance that a lot better, where people will maybe go doing some breath work to 2.5 minutes a day, or a session's going to help me rather than taking pills?
I think we're in a world where we're two extremes.
Yeah.
There's no in between. You have, if you go to any gym, you'll see the people there. I'm around a lot of fit people, so I don't see that many unfit people. But I think it's very much like America. You have the people who are really in their fitness, and they go some of them go over the top, because fitness is a stressor as well. I'll have people saying, "Oh, I don't know, I'm always catching a cold and flu." Well, what are you doing? Well, I go out for a run in the morning, then at lunchtime I go for another wee run, and at night I go and do some weights. And you think, you're doing far too much. It's a stressor. Learn to work with your body. So I think that there's extremes on both ends, and what we need to do is we need to have a wee bit of balance in our life. I run, but I don't run that far. I do weight burn exercises, my strength and conditioning, but I don't kill myself with it. And I do mobility, and I eat a reasonable diet. But if I go out on a Saturday night, I'll have a drink, I'll have a dessert. I won't. Life's for living. So yeah, I think it's people do sort of tap out on they put their health in somebody else's hands. My health is 100% in my hands. It is 100% in my hands. And if I break a leg, I'll certainly be going to accident emergency and getting them to fix my leg. But if I have a bit of a cold or a flu, I'll do my best to cope with it myself. If I have a muscular injury, I'll go and maybe get a massage. So I'll take control of that. What I've found is this in the south of Ireland, they're more predisposed to looking at alternatives rather than going to the doctor.
Okay.
And the reason for that is they have to pay €100 if they want to go to the doctors. Could you imagine how much we would cut down on visits to the doctor for things that aren't needed if everybody had to pay £100? Now, I'm not saying that that's the way it should be. I cannot tell anybody how to live their lives because I don't live a perfect life. But what I can do is I can be an example to my students and say, look, this is what I do. And this is how the courses started. I didn't start saying I want to take courses on breathwork. What happened was people said, could you do a breathwork course? Yeah, no problem, I'll do one. Did one, and then somebody else. Every course that I've done has been at the request of the likes of, I was in Donegal taking one for Milford Running Club. I was in Donegal taking one for Milford Jiu-Jitsu Club. I was down in Lisnaskea. I was teaching in a school. I taught every child in the school breathing over a two-day period. And again, it was an invite. I didn't go out looking for work, and then I've worked with Women's Aid. They invited me in to work with some of the women who are highly stressed. And with CRUN, which is a community group up in like the Korean area. So it's always been, people have invited me to do things, and then people have asked me to work one-on-one with them, and then I started doing that. And the only things that I wasn't invited to do was the free ones that I did on Zoom, because it just, to be fair, the first couple of weeks of lockdown I was bored.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get out. I wanted to do something. I really enjoy. I think that you spend, most people spend their lives, the first part of life, learning and getting knowledge. But we should, in the second stage of our life, we should start thinking, well, we need to give that knowledge out. I wouldn't be where I am today in my martial arts if it wasn't for some phenomenal coaches who were willing to give up their time for me. In breathwork, I've had phenomenal coaches in breathwork who have been willing to give up their time and mentor me and help me and support me. So it's just passing that on,
Going, if you don't mind, going back to when you first, like, how did you get into martial arts? What attracted you to jiu-jitsu?
Well, my martial arts journey would be different if I was starting today. It just would. When I started martial arts, I was 19. I'd left school at 16. I was hanging about with a group of guys, and they were good guys, but it was just finish work and go for a drink, or finish work and at the weekends get drunk and not remember anything on Sunday and that sort of thing. And it just wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't sort of floating my boat. And I decided I want to take up martial arts. But if you want to take up martial arts now, you go on your phone, you type in martial arts or jiu-jitsu or karate or whatever it may be, and you'll see all an abundance of clubs and details. I had to ring Sports Council, and they had a list of clubs, and there was a jiu-jitsu club in Macefield Leisure Centre, and I went down, and now we're all into, you have to fill in a form. Do you have any issues? Do you have previous injuries and all this sort of stuff we fill in before we start? Then it was just a case of, you want to do jiu-jitsu? Where you go, jump on those mats. And my first coach, we did a warm-up, and then he showed a technique. And the technique, it's called a monkey climb, or stomach throw, which entails them putting both their feet on your chest and throwing you over the top of their head. Yeah. And, if I seen a coach doing that in any of my classes, they would be out the door, because it's just crazy to teach somebody who'd never done jiu-jitsu that. So he threw me over the top of my head. I was 19. I landed on my back, and I felt my lungs were going to fall out. An extreme pain came over my body. And he just looked at me as if, get up. And got a couple of breaths, and I got up. And it could have went either two ways. If I hadn't had the personality that I had, I could have said, this shit isn't for me. I just walked out the door, because this guy could have broke my neck. But my personality was going, show me that again. How did you do that? Because there was we live in a world where you have access to everything now. Access, to everything on YouTube, on your phone, on your laptop. At that stage, you didn't have any of that access. You would have found it hard to actually get a martial arts magazine. So I was just hooked from day one, and I started training. And a lot of my coaches, to be fair, they were good martial artists, but they weren't good coaches.
Yeah.
So they would show you a technique, but wouldn't break it down and wouldn't explain it and wouldn't give you the fine detail of it. And you were just meant to learn it. I'm dyslexic. And part of the dyslexia for me, and it's different for everybody else, for everybody, they have their own sort of bits of it. But everybody knows dyslexia is something that you struggle to read and you struggle to write. But there's also parts of it where I struggle with my left and right, knowing which is my left and which is my right hand. Yeah. I struggle with sequencing. So if it's a do this, do this, do this, do this, no problem. But if it's do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and do that, then I've got the back end of it, but I forgot the front bit. And that's where I was with my techniques. So I was struggling. And I sort of had an internal thing where I said, if I ever teach, I'm going to break things down so people can understand. And within 6 months, I was helping in classes. Within a couple of years, I was teaching classes on my own. And by the time I was in my sort of early 20s, I was the national coach, and I moved forward and up the ranks. But I think that, like a lot of people, adversity makes you better at things. Yeah. I think that if you're totally gifted, you can find that you don't appreciate what you have. Whereas I really struggled in the early days of my martial arts. I really struggled with retention, with movement. I broke my pelvis when I was 12, and I had really restricted movement in my hip. And I had to work really hard for it. And because I worked hard for it, I was more grateful for it when I got it. And because I struggled with my own learning, I became a better coach, or I believe I became a better coach because I was breaking it down for people. Yeah. And I could see when people were struggling, and I'd go over and say, if you just move your hand this way and just twist that wrist a wee bit there, that's it, great job. Because martial arts used to be, get them in. The lower grades were cannon fodder for the higher grades, and if you survived a year or two, then you were part of the gang. But that has changed. Martial arts changed drastically.
See, what you call just one question, because it's something I'm always curious about. I ask quite a few people this question to try and help with my own learning. See, with quite an intricate art like jiu-jitsu, or even just as an example, as use jiu-jitsu because it's quite intricate. How, what advice would you give for someone to obviously learn quite an in-depth art, but as well as learn and seeing the whole system, but being able to then take from that and make it their own and practical themselves? If that makes sense as a question.
Yeah, total sense. So first of all, I teach traditional jiu-jitsu, which is obviously different to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And if I had been starting again at 19, I probably would have been training in both arts and looking at, I would have done so much more things. When I started, there was karate, there was jiu-jitsu, there was kung fu, and there was judo, and that was it. But now there's so many different arts to pick from. So for me, I personally believe that there's a sweet spot to learning. I think that if you are too anxious and want to progress too fast, it stands in the way of your progression. It's that whole theory that if there's a man who's trying to find a woman, or a woman who's trying to find a man, and that neediness puts people off. Yeah. But when they relax and say, look, I'm just going to live my life, and if someone comes along, then somebody walks into their life that's right for them. And I think that it's the same in all things. There's a sweet spot. If you don't care enough, you'll never be good at it. But if you care too much, I need to learn this, you're putting yourself, and again, it goes back to breath, you put yourself in that anxious state. And when you're in that anxious state, you can't think as clearly. And when you can't think as clearly, you can't get into the motor skills. Just again, I'm going slightly off topic, but it's the wrong topic. When you go into fight or flight, your smaller motor skills cease working. The gross motor skills are there, so you can swing punches, and you can run, but you can't make finer details. You can't. You'll see it in policemen who somebody's running at them with a hatchet, and they can't get their gun out of the holster because they're fumbling for it, because they're in fight or flight. Their motor skills are shot. So all fighters, no matter whether it's in the UFC or in a boxing ring, there's a calmness to them. They don't lose their temper in the ring. They might act like they do, but they're in control. They've trained that themselves that much that they're in control, and each punch is it's a matter of habit. So what we need to do is we need to get from stage of learning, which is where you don't know it at all, to you can do it when you think about it, to the stage where you can do it without thought. It's like it has to be as simple as if I say to somebody, go and switch the light switch off, they look for the light switch, they switch it, it's easy. But if I went into the Amazon jungle, pulled somebody out who'd never seen a light switch before and said, turn that light switch off, they go, what's a light switch? So we have to have that structure where it becomes that you don't have to think about it. You just don't have to think. And that's the stage people need to get to. And what stands in their way is, one, not working hard enough, and two, sounds strange, but working too hard. Putting themselves under too much pressure. You need to have that sweet spot in the middle where you have that desire and that ability. And it's time as well.
Yeah.
People aren't willing to invest the time to develop their art.
I think with society, with the way we live now, we've kind of handicapped ourselves where everything's convenient. Like you can order a meal from a restaurant and it'll be at your door within the hour. You can book a whole holiday, whereas 20 years ago you've had to go into the high street, into a travel agent and go through that step by step. Now you can do it all online. And I think that's you're right, that's people when we start an art, and then maybe as you're teaching them, they'll go, oh, I should be further along the road than what I should be, and then
100%. All the growth is in the discomfort. All the growth is putting yourself, if you think about all the things you've achieved in your life, and we make it very simple, learn how to drive. You know, you had to put yourself in an uncomfortable position to learn how to drive. Most people are a wee bit tense and nervous. And when you go to do your driving test, you're a wee bit anxious and you're a wee bit, you know, can you think of what would have happened if you had said, I'm too nervous, this isn't for me? You wouldn't be able to drive, you know. And if you go back to a child that's learned how to walk, now no child just gets up and starts walking and walks across the room and is perfect at it. A child will take a couple of steps, fall over, take another couple of steps and fall over. Now, they don't give up. They just don't give up, because I very rarely see any adults scooting about in their bum or crawling about in their board when they're going down the street. So it meant that they had this ability, this inbuilt ability to stick at it, to work at it, and to really put the effort in. And the reward was that they can walk. And the whole thing is, people start martial arts and they think, I'm going to be a martial artist and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then they get punched and it's sore and they think, oh, this isn't for me. And maybe it isn't for them, or maybe it is, but they just need to accept that there's going to be a bit of discomfort. You know, obviously you're into fitness and health. You know, how do you build a muscle? You break it down. You break it down. How do they make a good soldier? They break him or her down and then they rebuild them. And it's part of the process of life that we need to break down, and not break down, crazy breakdown, but in a manageable chunk, you know. And even emotionally, you'll see some of these Eckhart Tolle or whatever his name is, who's a very sort of spiritual guy, but he was broken and he had to be broken. And when you're in a relationship and it falls apart, you think the world's going to end, but then you get through it and you get out the other side and you maybe meet somebody who's far better and right for you than the person that you were with in the first place. And we do, as a race, we are getting very much into, you know, we have de-evolved. You know, we've evolved in so many ways, but if you look at you look at a wolf hunter, phenomenal hunter, sense of smell is fantastic, family community, and a wolf pack is phenomenal. And then you look at some of the dogs we have now, and they just wouldn't survive in the wild. And dogs are bred now, the likes of a bulldog has a breeding difficulty. I used to have a German Shepherd and bad hips because that slope in their back was bred into them. So an actual deficiency was bred into the dog to make it look pretty. Yeah. And what has happened is, as human beings, you know, you go back in centuries and men were strong and muscular because they had to be. They were working, they were chasing down animals. They were gathering food for 7-8 hours a day, and it was the stronger survived, and that's no longer the case. So to a certain extent, we mentally we've grown, but physically people aren't as strong as they used to be.
I think there was
facial structures changed in humans. Jaws are shallower, and that's why sort of people are having sleep apnea as well. Your throat should be the size of your thumb. For a lot of people, their throat's the size of their finger because their jaw is too shallow. And the reason their jaw is too shallow is, one, we don't eat food that we have to chew anymore. It's all processed food is quite easy to eat. So we're not exercising our jaw. And when you think about it, if I use my bicep, if I exercise, it gets bigger, gets stronger. If I don't exercise my jaw, then the muscles aren't as strong. So our jaw isn't strong, and also mouth breathing changes the shape of your face.
I think, I remember when I was preparing for this interview, I remember hearing it was they're saying about like braces. I remember I had braces when I was younger, and the dentist saying you have too many teeth. But the explanation, I think, was that guy on the Joe Rogan podcast was saying, what you were saying, because our jaws are getting smaller because we're not chewing. Yes, those teeth are fine, but
Yeah.
it's just your mouth's crowded to capacity, so that you have to yank some teeth out.
You know, if you go back 500 years and you look at the teeth of those people, teeth are perfect. They're straight. There's no fillings. Good teeth. If you think about that being you're trying to get the angle right, if that's your upper jaw, because it all comes from your upper jaw, if that's your upper jaw, it's actually formed by your tongue.
Okay.
If your tongue sits on the floor of your mouth, then instead of your upper jaw being formed like that, it's formed shallower. So you have a shallower, and then your bottom jaw is pushed back a wee bit, and because it's pushed back a wee bit, your throat is smaller. And then that leads to problems when you're sleeping, sleep apnea and that sort of thing. So these things can be corrected in children quite easily with some exercise. In adults, it's a bit harder. But there's an epidemic of people over 50 having sleep apnea, you know, and any form of apnea that they're having, it increases risks of Alzheimer's and risks of heart disease and all these different risks. So for me, if I don't wear the tape at night, I snore. And if I snore, it means I'm breathing through my mouth, because I lie on my back, my mouth naturally opens. So tape every night.
See,
go ahead.
Sorry. Just the other thing I was wanting to ask, just because obviously coaching is obviously a big part of your life.
Yeah.
What just for anyone who maybe a teacher or a coach themselves, what's the best? What makes a good coach?
I think, you know, I don't think coaches are born, but I certainly think people have a predisposition to do a certain job. So I know people who I know one of my students worked in a bank and absolutely hated it. And she was a lovely girl, very caring type of person. And she changed professions at sort of quite not late in her life, but quite late. And she became a nurse, and she loves it because that's her nature. Her nature is to be caring and loving. And then there's other people who are very good with numbers, who may be good at accounting or whatever. I think that you have to enjoy it. You know, if you're not enjoying teaching people, I love it when I see somebody progress. I love it when I see somebody who can't do something, and because of my support, they've been able to do it. And if you actually enjoy what you do, you will be good at it. I just think you'll be good at it because you'll be always looking at a way to fine tune what you do. And I've been teaching for 35 odd years, and I'm teaching kids, very young kids, and right up to sort of adults and people in their 50s and 60s. And everybody comes with their own issues and own problems. And it's not necessarily just about the jiu-jitsu, because some people will come in and they will be highly aggressive. And you have to actually temper that, because they're not going to get on in martial arts or in life if they're too aggressive. So it's actually getting them to understand their aggression, maybe understand why they're aggressive, and teach them ways of actually controlling it. Martial arts is great for anybody who's highly aggressive. It's a good way. I would call it a safe surrogate, because if you're aggressive by nature and you don't do any form of martial arts, well, where are you going to express that aggression? It's going to be with your girlfriend or your wife or your boyfriend or your husband, or it's going to be on a Saturday night where you're going to get in a fight at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's not going to go well for you. Whereas if you go into a martial arts class and you get to hit things, and you get to hit people, but they're getting to hit you back, then that expresses that aggression, and you can go home and go, and aggression's gone. I look at it like if you have a kettle and you're boiling the water in the kettle, you have to release the steam. If you didn't have anywhere for the steam to go, eventually that kettle would explode. And that's what happens with people. They explode. So one set of people, very aggressive, it's a safe surrogate. It's a way to get rid of some of that aggression and also to learn to control that aggression. And then there's other people who come in and they're very timid and they're not very confident, and you have to actually almost pull them out of that discomfort and get them to actually push themselves a wee bit. And you have to know which is which. As a coach, you need to know who you need to calm down, who you need to bring forward. You also need to know that sometimes with a student, it may need to be a hand on the shoulder saying, "Is everything okay? You're not training as well as you usually do." And at another stage, it might be, "Come on, get yourself on the mats, get changed, get on the mats. I want to see you training." So sometimes it's a kick up the backside, sometimes it's a hand on the shoulder, and you have to know which one to use at what time, because it's actually, as a coach, you're not just a coach. You're almost like a therapist and a social worker and a big brother, or a father figure. If you're teaching kids, my father wasn't in my life, so I had a few people who were father figures, but not a real father figure. But there's so many single parent families out there with young children who don't have a father figure, and martial arts can give them a good role model. Somebody who is, the martial art that I teach, we teach discipline, respect, and we work with the kids, and no matter what their level is, we encourage them. And that's priceless for a child, to have someone in their life external to their family that cares about them in a structured way. So I think that coaching, to be a good coach, number one, you have to want to be a good coach, and you have to work at it. You have to work at it on a daily basis. I learn every day. I learn from teaching and interacting with my students, but it's a process you never finished. A lifetime of learning knows no end. It just doesn't.
And with your own training and learning, what does your typical day look like, or even a week look like?
Yeah, I'm trying to calm down. So I'm not working well. Obviously, I'm in lockdown. I was in lockdown, and I have other bits and pieces, and my dojo isn't operating the way it was. So it's probably best to tell you what way it was before lockdown. I would usually get up about 6 o'clock. I'd have a cup of tea. I would get changed. I have a lovely lake very close to my house that I'd run around. So I'd run around the lake. Sometimes at the end of the run, I do a wee sort of to camera podcast to some of my private groups. And when I'm running, I'm either just doing some breathing exercises, or else I'm listening to a podcast. So, that's your podcast. This morning I was listening as I was running. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast. Sometimes when I'm running, I will, because of the dyslexia, I'm not great at actually physically reading books, so I'll listen to books on Audible, and I'll do that while I'm running. Then I come home. I was in Finland quite some time ago. I can't remember how long it was. For talk's sake, say 5 years ago. And really heavy sessions. And then after the session, everybody went to the sauna. Everybody went to the sauna and drank beer and vodka. But went to the sauna, and the sauna was really, if you had a tough session, the sauna was phenomenally good to release tension from your body. You detox your body. And I started to research saunas. And if you look up Joe Rogan and his thing on sauna, he's very into saunas as well. So infrared saunas are phenomenally good for your health. So the following year I said, listen, for Christmas and my birthday, I want a sauna. So we got a sauna. We got it in the January sale, so it wasn't that expensive, and it's in a spare room. So I would go up, switch the sauna on, come down, do a wee bit of mobility, not a massive amount, and then go up and have a sauna, have a bit of a cold shower. Not really, I know the health benefits of cold showers, but I don't particularly like them. So I'll do a wee bit. I won't do a full ice bath, things like that. Although I do it from time to time. And then I get a shower, get some breakfast. Then I'll work on this. Is my office. This is my office here at the minute. I have an office at the Martial Arts Centre. This is an office at home. In the office, come home about 4:30, have a bite to eat, and then out and teach. And I can either be teaching to about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then home, cup of coffee, sit down, have a chat with my wife, watch some crap on television, and then go to bed about 11:30, 12, and then start again. At the weekends, I'm either taking a course or teaching in a dojo or doing a jiu-jitsu assessment. And then my weekends are, I try to set my weekends where I finish at some point on Saturday afternoon, and that's me done. And I spend Saturday night. I used to go out for a meal. I haven't been out since lockdown, but go out for a meal, share a bottle of wine with my wife, just have a really, have a very good relationship with my wife. And I think, if you want to be successful, have good relationships. And that doesn't mean to say you have to have a wife or a husband or whatever, but have good relationships, people you can rely on. And then Sunday, it's usually I'm up a port shirt, I'm going for a run on the beach, go for coffee, just laze about and do nothing, and then it all starts again on Monday. But going back to relationships, I think key to having a successful life is having successful relationships. You don't have to have a big circle of friends. You just need to have a few people close to you that you can sit down and be honest and be yourself with. Because we all put this mask on, the tough guy or the entrepreneur or the this or the that or whatever. But there's only a very few people actually know you as who you really are. Yeah. And it's important to have those people in your life because they keep you grounded and they keep you right. So
who's been who would be some of the biggest influencers in your life over the past few years?
Yeah, well, so as far as coaches and mentors, my I had coaches in Northern Ireland. My first jiu-jitsu coach was a guy called Rory Beadle. And then I moved on and I was with a guy called Raymond Shaw. And I was teaching him, by the time I was training with Raymond Shaw, I was 20. He was only 19. And you always think about coaches being older. Yeah. But at 19, he just had a gift at teaching martial arts. And he would have been, in my sort of early stages of martial arts, he would have been one of my best coaches. Mark Noble was another one of my coaches. And again, good work. Then Professor Clark, he was head of World Jiu-Jitsu worldwide. And again, had some really phenomenal skills and coaching set, but sometimes was hard work, hard to please. And sometimes when somebody's hard to please, it makes you work harder to please them, so it makes you better. So I can understand that. In recent years, Spartaco Bertoletti, who's an Italian, the head of World Jiu-Jitsu, good organization, love his mentality. He would, for instance, a quick story about CK or Spartaco Bertoletti. I was doing a course in Italy and he was doing a course as well. And he picked me up in Milan and he said, okay, we're going to drive to the course. And I said, all right, okay, how far is it? He says, oh, it's about 8-9 hours. And I went, what? He said 8 or 9 hours. And he drove, this guy's 78? And he drove 8 or 9 hours. We got to the leisure centre. We got to the hotel around about 11 o'clock that night. We had a quick bite to eat, up the next morning, taking a course all day long, really intense in the heat and whatever, taking a course. Then we had to go to, we went to a dinner and we were out till late. And then next morning, 9 hours driving back to his house. And I stayed overnight in his house. And the next morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, okay, knocking the door. Okay, we're going for a run, And 6 o'clock in the morning, he was out for a run, even though he had driven 9 hours, taken a course, driven another 9 hours the next day. And that's he is constantly trying to improve and develop. And even when he's traveling, he carries in his kit bag some training aids, and he'll train in his gym in his hotel room at that age. So he has I love his mentality. Yeah. I really align myself with Steve Maxwell. I've had him in Ireland 3-4 times. A bit of a strange character. He pulls no punches whatsoever. He tells you exactly, if you're not doing it right, you're not doing it right. and like his mentality, like his minimalism. His training's very minimalist. Everything he does, he's looking for the most simple way to do a complex thing.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Because a lot of people try to bewilder you with their knowledge, where he doesn't. He just says, "This isn't this hard. You have to do this, this, and this, and as long as you're doing that, everything's okay." You know, and he keeps his eating pattern simple, his sleeping pattern simple. All his training is very, very simple. And then I've been working sort of in more recent years with Patrick McKeown, and he would be one of my instructor. He'd be my instructor in the oxygen advantage, which is more geared to sports performance and breathing, and then also in Buteyko breathing, which is more geared towards taking people out of anxiety, out of stress, taking people out of if they have asthma, lowering their symptoms of asthma, and all these other sort of areas like that. And my wife, I have to say, my wife, she's just, you know, she keeps me really well grounded. She works with me in World Jiu-Jitsu. I would do the mat type stuff and the coaching type stuff, and she would do the hard, as far as I'm concerned, the harder work of maintaining the organization and doing the child protection and the vulnerable adult policies and looking after memberships and insurances and day-to-day problems that arise and looking after the website and things like that. So yeah, but I can talk to a 5-year-old child, and that 5-year-old child can give me information that you go, wow, you know, or an attitude to life. That you know, I made a comment on a private group. It was a breathwork group, and it's like, you know, when you get martial arts together, they'll all argue about which is the best and what's the best technique. And so when you get breathwork people, and I'd posted something, and this guy said, you know, that I said, the facts are the facts. I finished it by saying, the facts are the facts. It was like, the facts are the facts, and what I'm saying is correct. Nobody else has. And this guy called me on it. He just called me on it. He said, you just can't say that. And I could have went back and been arrogant and said, how dare you say, I know what I'm talking about, I have qualifications. And I went back and said, you're right, thank you. You're right, thank you. And I actually sent him a private message and said, I really appreciate you actually sending me that, because it's good every now and then, because you can't just say the facts are the facts. You have to, you know, you have to back it up with a good argument. So I actually sent him a message and I said, I appreciate you saying that. And he sort of was bewildered that anybody would come back, because most times if you said something to somebody like that, they'd argue with you.
Yeah.
But every now and again, you can get a wee bit too arrogant, and you can get a wee bit too ahead of yourself. And I think that it's good for people to actually say, no, you know what? I disagree with you. As long as they do it in a nice way.
Yeah.
You know, as long as, you know, I'm sure you'll have people will post on this or other stuff you've done, and they'll be derogatory about it. I watched Joe Rogan's podcast, and I looked at some of the comments, and some of the comments were brilliant, and some of them were really ripping into Joe Rogan. And I thought, what's that all about? But that's the way people are, you know. Yeah. But as long as criticism is constructive, I'll take constructive criticism all day long. But when they just say, you know, post underneath your thing, you're a dick. Well, that's not really constructive, is it? And it says more about them than it does about you. So So a lot of coaches, a lot of people supporting me, and people have supported me that don't even know me, because I'll watch a podcast and I'll get something from that. And that's why I think it's good what you're doing, because you're just talking to people. We tend to think in Northern Ireland that we have to go external to Northern Ireland to get good information, that there's nobody in Northern Ireland can tell you anything. And the funny thing is, for me to learn a Russian style of breathing, I learned it from a guy who's probably one of the most predominant ones in the world in Buteyko breathing. And he lives in the south of Ireland, you know? And I thought I would have had to travel to Russia to learn it.
Yeah. And
I can learn it here. So we have a wealth of really solid information here. And it's that old theory, you can't be a prophet in your own land. I'll go to Russia and people will ask me for my autograph when I'm taking a martial arts class. Or Cuba, or go to Israel and people are asking me to sign the back of their martial arts suits, put an autograph on it. I'm teaching in Northern Ireland, it's just, they're sensei. You know, it means nothing. So I think it's important what you're doing. I think that it gives people in Northern Ireland a voice.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to say you're not going to be interviewing people from around the world. But we have a wealth of knowledge here that is untapped. It really is untapped. And I firmly believe there's no point taking all your knowledge to the grave with you. Yeah. That the only reason to have it is to pass it on. Because everything that I know, somebody else has taught me. I didn't come up with this on my own. All the skill that I have I'm the product of all my coaches. So if there's, say somebody watches this and there's one wee snippet they can get out of that, well, then it's worth making.
Yeah.
It's absolutely worth making. So I appreciate you bringing me on, and I appreciate the fact that you're actually putting the time and effort into doing this, because it's a bit of a thankless task, isn't it?
No, it's something. But when you look at when I first started, this first person I actually interviewed was Emma Brennan, and I remember going, how might I even approach this? One of the things I said to her was, if you look at Northern Ireland, especially if you grow up here, everything on the news is negative. It really is. It's constant. It's either about our economy is going to fail. There's a budget deficit, or talks and storming have broken down. And it's nice to be. I'm not saying I'm going to be a change all that, but it's nice to be part of, in a small way, to show actually there's more going on here. There's people doing amazing things. They've got amazing mindsets like yourself, and I want to try and get that out to a wider audience, and maybe encourage people here to take a bit of pride of who they are, and I know that and where they're from, and that they can actually bring positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it all starts with just somebody having a voice, or giving somebody a voice, and putting yourself out there and risking the sort of the people saying, that's rubbish or whatever. But, for everyone who's going to sort of say it's rubbish, there's going to be another few that are going to say, you know what, that's a really good idea. That's a good concept. And, there's hundreds of people have thought about doing podcasts, but very few people do them. It's that putting yourself in that, it's going back to that, all the growth is in the discomfort. It's uncomfortable doing the first one. And then once you do a few, you start getting used to it, and it becomes second nature to you. But just before we wrap up, one last big question, and I know it's always going to be a tricky one when I ask us. What's probably the most singlest, if there is, best advice you've ever heard or learned over the past few years? Singlest best advice. That's you could have told me about that before, and I could have thought about it. For me, the best advice anybody can have is just to believe in themselves a wee bit. I think people have this attitude that everybody else knows more than they do. I know I certainly have had in the past, and I'm not saying that I know any more than anybody else, but I've met some phenomenal people. And some, you watch them on a stage, or you watch them somewhere and you go, wow, they have it all together. They know exactly what they're doing. And then you get to know them, and you realize they're as messed up as everybody else. If you look at Johnny Depp is on in the news at the minute. When you look at him in his Pirates of the Caribbean, or when you look at him when he's doing his press conferences, he looks like he's got it together. He obviously a wee bit weird, but he looks like he's got it together. And then you realize that he's drinking wine for breakfast and allegedly hitting his wife, and she's hitting him. And you realize that it's the grass is not always greener on the other side. I think that if we all just calm down a bit and weren't striving for something that's out there and sort of got what was in here and realize that we're much better than we think we are. We have a bias towards putting ourselves down, that you wouldn't let anybody else speak to you the way you speak to yourself. Yeah. Most people, you know. So why, you know, if the external world's beating you down a bit, why would you actually help them? So the best advice would be have a wee bit of faith in yourself. And if you lack confidence or you lack skill in any field that you want to be better at, go out and get the skill. Yeah. Go out and get it. You know, so if you have a problem with your confidence, and listen, it's epidemic proportion people with anxiety. You know, and what are they anxious about? They're anxious about something that hasn't happened or may never happen. You know, if I go out tonight, I might meet such and such, and they might say this. Or if I get in the car, I might not be able to drive in traffic. Or I might not, or I cannot. They're sort of creating a reality that doesn't really exist. You know, so it's about putting yourself out there, taking the risks, and you know, there was a thought in your head at one point. There was a thought in your head that said, "I'm going to do this." I've watched London Real, and I'm going to do Belfast Real. That was a thought. That's all it was. One thought. Now you could have said to yourself, "Don't be stupid. You could never do that," or you could say, "I'm going to give it a go." And the point is, look at the direction it's taken your life because you had one thought and you went with it. And there's so many people sitting in their houses that think, I wish I could do jiu-jitsu, or I wish I was slimmer, or I wish I didn't have asthma, or I wish I wasn't so anxious. But wishing isn't going to take it away. You know, wishing's not going to make it happen. You actually have to take the action. So have a bit of faith in yourself, take action for the things you want, and go out and get them. Just go out and get them. You know, at one point, you know, when I was a child, 5 years old, asthma, living in a flash point in the middle of the Troubles, mother and father broke up. You know, I would have every right as an adult to be an alcoholic, to feel sorry for myself, say that I was traumatized as a child. And I'm not taking anything away from anybody who has been traumatized. But what I'm saying is that if something traumatized you earlier in your life, then whoever traumatized you is still controlling your life until you take control of yourself and say, look, I'm going to do something about this. And that is hard. That is hard. I've worked with a lot of different groups. I've worked with Women's Aid, and I've worked with other groups. And it's so hard when you've been beaten down to actually stand up for yourself. But it's that stand up for yourself that's going to make all the difference, you know. So that was a wee bit longer than.
No, that was great. I say thank you, and I say it's good to kind of pick people's brains and share that with other people. If anyone wants, what's coming next for you, and if anyone wanted to contact you about some breath work or martial arts training, how do they do that?
Yeah. So what's next with the dojo? I manage a dojo in Ballymena. It just opened again on the 10th. We're doing limited. We're doing social distancing. We're doing all those things. So hopefully we'll get people back there. World Jiu-Jitsu as a whole, most of our clubs are based in the leisure centres, so that dictates when we'll be back. Just because the leisure centres are open doesn't mean to say they'll allow the clubs to open. So when they allow the clubs to open, we'll have them back. So as far as jiu-jitsu, we'll be back when we can. If anybody wants to know their nearest club, it's just jiu-jitsuireland.com. Go to clubs and it'll tell you where your clubs are. As far as sort of the breath work's concerned, I'm finding myself going towards the breath work. I'll always be teaching jiu-jitsu, but I'm finding myself going towards it because I feel that I can help more people with that. It takes a while. It takes a long time to get somebody up to black belt in jiu-jitsu. Whereas with the breath work, you can see actual change.
Yeah.
If I'm on a course, I can see change in 2.5 minutes. I can take people from sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system. I can decrease their blood pressure in 2.5 minutes. So it's a quicker fix. But again, that can be done over sort of months. So I'm finding myself going down that way. I have a private group that I have, which is Breath Sensei on Facebook. David Toney, Toney. You'll find me on Facebook. I have david-toney.com is one of my websites. I'm all over the place, to be fair. So you can catch
I'll
me.
include links in the bottom, so I'll put all those links in the bottom.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So listen, I'm at a stage in my life where I've nothing left to prove to anybody. You know, what I've done is what I've done. And I want to now just enjoy life a wee bit more. So my drug of choice, because we all have addictions. Some people's addictions is alcohol, drugs, sex, violence, running. My drug of choice was work. I was like a workaholic, and I'm managing that a lot better now. I'm trying to spend a bit more time with my family. I've had 2 new grandchildren in the past 2-3 months.
And there was one born yesterday, Ezra.
Yeah. So my granddaughter, or sorry, my daughter-in-law sent me a message. She said the breath work was really good when she was in a lot of pain and labour, but I taught her some breath work stuff, and she said it was really good. And the midwife actually said your breath work's really on point. So that was good.
Congratulations on the new arrival.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm sort of trying to not work as hard, but when I do work, make sure that I give people the best of me that I can, you know. So that's the idea anyway.
And David, thank you so much. Hopefully, I know we'll talk after this interview, but hopefully we'll come back on again and we'll do a wee follow up.
Yeah, no problem. Listen,
which would be great if that works.
Yeah, happy to be on, and I do appreciate the fact. I do appreciate the invite, and I do appreciate the fact that this is, you know, I look back at the London Reels back in the day when it was done like this, and now you look at the studio they have, you know, so you never know. Yeah, you might have the shirt and tie and the big hanky out of your pocket in another couple of years' time, you know. So everybody has to start somewhere. So appreciate being part of it. I think I'm in the first 10 or 20, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you, and best luck for going forward. And
thank you.
We'll have our chat again soon. So thank you.